The Gulf Coast Growth Show is sponsored by Chevron Pasadena Refinery and is an extension of the Economic Alliance Houston Port Region, where our mission is to market and grow a vibrant regional economy.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Gulf Coast Growth Show. I'm your host, Jason Lee, and I'm joined by my co-host, Zeke Smith.
What's up, Jason?
Zeke, glad to have you today.
Yes,
and we
sir.
are joined by Chad Kalland from Vecta Environmental Services LLC, the CEO. Chad, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure having you on. Chad, I reached out to you personally because I've become a big fan of yours and the content you're putting on LinkedIn. I think it's especially important for the CEO and leaders of organizations to go out there and really talk about their people and the things that they care about.
Yep.
And we were talking a little bit before the show, and that's really what today's show is about, really kind of the growth of your company, but then how that growth has had a lot to do with people and mentoring and coaching and developing those folks. And so I can't think of a guy who, I mean, when you think about it, going from 10 employees a decade ago to 500 now, that's a pretty good story. And so that's probably the kind of guy you want to have on here talking about leadership. So thanks for joining us.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah. So as we dive in, for our audience, I know a little bit about your story, but tell everybody else a little bit about your personal story, and then a little bit about Vectas.
Yeah, so I joined Vecta in 2013. My background is I've been in the environmental field since college. We kind of came out of college with a degree in chemistry and biology. Started cleaning up Superfund sites and kind of went from there into emergency response, environmental remediation, and all those things. Partnered up with Kenny at a previous company. Kenny Rouse is the founder of Vecta.
Okay.
Kenny and I worked together for several years at another company. I left in 2009. Kenny left in 2010, shortly after. And he was approached by a customer who liked the work he did, valued his attention to quality. Mm-hmm. And asked Kenny if he would clean his tanks. He said, well, I'd love to do your work, but let me check with the company he was working for. And the customer said, well, the bad news is I can't pay you, So Kenny ran it by his employer, and they had no interest, but said, so Kenny went back and said, no, we can't do it. He said, well, what about you? And then Kenny's like, man, I can do it, So just on his nights and weekends, he went out there and cleaned the tanks, and 6 months later, they cut him a check, and Vecta started. So, he started it, kind of bootstrapped it from there.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah, I joined him shortly after. And now we have, like you said, 500 employees kind of stretched across the Gulf Coast.
Right. Yeah, you said from New Mexico down to Florida.
In New Mexico down to Florida, up to Alabama. So, it's still growing. So
unbelievable.
We're excited,
talk to us a little bit about Vecta, what you guys do, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I kind of like to say we're like preventative maintenance for the global supply chain, right?
Okay.
Our customers are oil refineries, chemical plants, manufacturing, utility companies, and we work on their equipment to make sure that they're operating at high efficiency. Right?
Okay.
If their heat exchangers are fouling up, we go in and clean them. If their tanks need cleaning, we go clean them. For power companies, we dig holes to put power poles in. So our services help the companies that you've heard of, the big Fortune 500 companies, operate effectively and efficiently.
Okay, nice. And you got, like, obviously as the CEO of the business, you kind of grown and watched it grow.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of tell us a little bit about the story of that, because I think that's a massive expansion over the course of 10 years. So, I mean, I want to dig in a little there. Like, how do you go from managing 10 people to 500? Like, walk me through that experience.
Initially it was, because Kenny and I came up in the industry, we had good connections in the industry, right?
Okay.
So we would hire the people that we knew and respected, and try to surround ourselves with the best in the business. So it was easy, to go from 10 to 50, it wasn't hard to do that without going outside of our network, right? And then, we continued to, when we moved to Houston in 2015, we did the same thing. We didn't have the connections that we had over in Louisiana, but we had a few, and we reached out to the people that we thought were the best in the business. And that we've continued to do that. By hiring experts in their field, we're able to kind of expand on what we do. We pride ourselves as being kind of a high quality provider. It's a big industry, and to differentiate ourselves, we really focused on quality, and to do that, we had to hire the best people, and nurture them and help them grow. I like to say that what we do is we take someone who might have hit a ceiling at another company and we bring them in and give them another ceiling.
There you go. So you're a ceiling creator.
We think so.
There you go. I like it.
Opener of doors and raiser of ceilings.
There you go.
Yeah.
So Zeke has a passion for people.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I want to first say, a lot of folks when starting a business think you got to have a website and a business plan and a product, those things. What you have to have is a paying customer.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I love that story that, hey,
Yeah.
you didn't have a plan or a website or a LinkedIn page. You had somebody who wanted to pay him later
Yep.
for some services. And so that's how you start a business. So I think if you take nothing else away from today, it's like, hey, you're thinking about starting a business, go find a customer or three that wants to pay you for something that you can do for them, and let's go. And the rest will work itself out, right?
It'll work itself out.
So Jason mentioned that, the growth over the 10 years, you attributed that to the people, your network, right? Mm-hmm. So you're with some good people. So tell us about let's talk about culture, right? Because sometimes in rapid growth, and maybe 10 years is rapid to some and not to others, and sometimes rapid growth can change a culture, positively or negatively. So what have you guys stood behind? What's your kind of values and culture that have led you for, the last 10 years, this growth and keeping the people that you want?
Yeah. So the two things that we really pride ourselves on are kind of what we were founded on is really employee safety and customer satisfaction, right? So, from Kenny founding it with that one customer, he built a relationship with that customer. That's kind of the model we use moving forward, right? We really want to have a relationship with our customer. We're not just a provider; we're a partner in their work, right?
Except for not paying you for 6 months.
And look, we still have customers who want to pay us in 6 months.
We won't name them here, but yeah.
No. But what I think it helps that I'm in Houston, Kenny's in Louisiana, in Gonzales, Louisiana, which is outside of Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
Our VP of operations is in Lake Charles. So we kind of have our leadership team is spread out.
Nice.
So we're actively involved in all areas of the operation. So if there's something going on in Houston, we're not too far removed for it. And it helps that because we hired kind of people in our network and close to our network, we know what they're about when they come on board. They know what we're about. So the adjustment, there's not a whole lot of adjustment as far as culture. We're hiring people that we can work with. And because our frontline leadership, the guys out in the field every day, kind of came up in that, then the new hires, they blend right into that. The values that we kind of started the organization with, they carry on through our frontline leadership. Sure. So anybody who comes into the organization and starts first day on the job site, they're going to get employee safety, customer satisfaction, integrity, those values from the very start.
What's your mix of kind of leadership, non-craft, or the guys in the field? What's your mix of the 500?
I mean, the vast majority, 400 plus are people who work on our customers' job sites every day.
Okay.
We run pretty lean up top. All of our revenue is generated on a customer's job site. So, probably 425 if I had to guess, ballpark.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then how do you, one thing that's always amazed me is when you talk about culture and integrity and the things that you guys do, how do you get out into the field to be able to validate what it is that you guys are doing? I mean, as a CEO, and how do you measure that effectiveness? Because I would think, I ran, for at one point in time, my career, I ran probably several hundred employees, but I was able to, my job consisted of, it was in retail. So I was in those boxes every day, and observing and seeing what was taking place with my team.
Yeah.
I can imagine across New Mexico down to Florida, that's probably hard to do.
Yeah, it is.
So how do you get a pulse and then also how do you communicate the pulse to them to keep them engaged so they remember how great Vecta is when they're just, in the trenches sweating it out and doing it on a job site day in and day out? How do you plug into those guys?
Yeah, like you said, it's impossible to get to every job site.
Right.
We have, every day we probably have, 100 jobs going on. It's possible,
My gosh.
right? So what we do is we have regular meetings with our division managers. Executive team and division managers are talking constantly. And then, we get out, we try to make it every quarter to each of our offices.
Okay.
Right? So can't do it every month. We have 10 offices now. So if I can get to each quarter, each office every quarter, meet with the employees. We still, as often as possible, we try to do social events with our employees so they know, so we can interact with them. Because it's just, when you get to a certain size, unfortunately, I don't know every employee's first name. I don't recognize them by,
Right.
but we still want to get out and let them know that we're present, we're active in the business. We want to know what they're doing, how they're doing. More importantly, we want to know about their families, their hobbies, those type things. So
Okay, great.
But we judge the business basically by customer retention. If I talked about employee safety, so our OSHA record, our OSHA numbers are important to us. Our number of incidents and accidents are important to us. So we track those to make sure our employees are operating safely. And then our customer retention. And if we can keep our customers, which we have a really good record of doing, that means we're serving them and solving their problems for them. So if we can keep our OSHA numbers to a minimum and our customer retention, as high as possible, we're doing the two things we want to do.
So those are the big rocks in your scorecard.
That's it.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. So you talked a lot about your leadership team, and then really pouring into that group. That's where you had the most direct impact. Talk to me about what mentoring and leadership development looks like in your organization.
Yep. So we have a strong mentor relationship with our frontline supervisors. Like I said, we've most of our supervisors in the field have 8 to 15 years of experience. So when a new hire comes in, they're weeks in training before they make it to a job site.
Wow.
But when they get to a job site, they're paired up with a supervisor who's been in the field, who mentors them, walks them through the process, and they work with that person for months until they're really kind of able to be on their own, because we really want to, make sure that they understand the importance of safety on the job site. Right. The work we do is dangerous. There's just no way around it. We can make it as safe as possible, and there are inherent dangers. So
sure.
So mentorship on the job site is key. But we also have, mentorship. I mentor a lot of our operations managers, some of our division managers and account managers, just on a personal level.
Nice.
Because I think it's important. I think, the more mentors you can have, the more coaches you can have, the more people you have holding you up, the more likely it is you're going to be successful.
Yeah. More feedback, right? More feedback you can get, more dialogue. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Love it. So let's talk about Vecta. Big news. You got anything coming up? Big announcements? Other than the success you've already talked about?
Yeah, we are still continuing to grow. We opened 2 new offices last year. We opened an office in Beaumont. We opened one in Decatur, Alabama. We've got at least 1 more coming this year, possibly 2. And we're going to continue to add service lines to what we do. Customers, they like what we do. They like the service we provide, and they're always asking us to do more. A lot of times, that means we can either mark it up. We could take a subcontractor and add additional cost on it, which we don't prefer to do. We'd rather hook our customer up with someone who can help them directly. But, when the opportunity presents itself, we'll start taking on that service line if we can find, like I talked about, if we can find the right person, an expert in that service line, we'll take them on. So we've got a few more of those coming this year too.
Wow. Awesome. That's exciting.
Yeah, big news. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm be curious to see what the next 10 years holds. Right?
It's going to be fun. The last 10 have been fun. The next 10 should be fun too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We'll have to go back 10 years from now, have another episode.
There you go.
And
hopefully
check this one out and see what happens. Maybe you're at 1,000 plus.
Well, my guess is it's going to be faster than 10 years.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think the progression's there. So let's talk a little bit now. One of the things that really intrigued me when we first talked on the phone over a year ago was your heart and your passion for people, and it's not just the people that work for you, but really it's touching up with others and actually making a difference in the areas that you serve in. I know you're involved. I think racism is or addressing the issue in and of itself,
right?
And I think you had a pretty cool story that kind of about your time in the field and kind of how that became so important to you. But I know you're involved with the Center for Healing of Racism. Yep. Tell us why that why that seemed to resonate with you in such a major way.
So, I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, and it's a Navy town, real diverse. So, and our house was the house that all the kids came to, right? So at any given day in my household, it looked like, there's kids from all walks of life, all races, all cultures. Mm-hmm. So it's always been something that's been instilled in me. It's, my parents instilled in me the value and the beauty in every person and common humanity, right? So when I got to Houston, I was introduced to the Center of Healing of Racism, which is, does a lot of education around, the struggles of racism, the challenge of racism and what it presents in our society. So I had kind of my nonprofit work there, and I had my business work here. But one day I was walking through a trade show, and I just it hit me that, my employee base is probably 60 to 75% people of color, right?
Right.
And my competitors are similarly structured.
Right.
But I was walking through a trade show, and I noticed that everyone on the floor looked like me.
Right.
So I thought, where's the door that keeps everyone else out, right? So, and then what can I do to open those doors?
Nice.
So when I talk about, opening doors and raising ceilings, that's kind of one of the things that I think of as, it's an important part of leadership.
I love it. I think that needs to be the title of your book, Opening Doors and Raising Ceilings. Yeah, there you go.
One of these days.
Yeah, absolutely. You can give me a little proceeds
I will.
from it. Yeah,
you're going to
just
get
for
at least
the
an
name.
acknowledgement in the back of the
at
book.
least in the back, right? Thanks
Yeah.
for the name, Jason. What about the Second Story Project? What's that about?
So the Second Story Project is an organization I co-founded with a friend of mine here in Houston. He's a therapist in Houston, and during kind of the riots after the murder of George Floyd, I reached out to Ernest and I said, "Hey, I'd like you to help me put together a workshop that we can present at the center to kind of move people into action." What we found, because what we were noticing is people were just kind of entrenched in their own views and kind of shouting at each other across the aisle. Like, what can we do to move beyond that, to get people to start talking to each other? So Ernest said, let's do something bigger. So we co-founded a nonprofit called Second Story Project. And what we really try to focus on is you can have your story, and your story is valid. It's based on your life's history and your views, and it's valid, right? Mm-hmm. And I can have mine based on mine, and mine is valid. So how can we, from that difference, how can we co-create space that we can create a second story together? So we work with organizations to try to create cultures of belonging and inclusion. It's not a typical DEI program. It's much more about communication, listening, and organizational development.
Love it.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. All right, so as we, I guess, tail into this thing, home stretch.
Yep.
Obviously, at least from the outside, I think you consider yourself a successful professional. Give our audience some tips of things that you think have gotten you here, some things that, just so your pillars in your life, and whether professional or personal, that have helped get you to where you want to be. And maybe it's things that have helped you in the company as well, and get the company where you want it to be.
Right. One thing for sure I talked about already is really surround yourself with the best people, right? And it's whether it's in your personal life or your professional life. I think, what is it saying? If you find yourself the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room.
Yeah.
So that's a key to me. I surround myself with people who share my values, people who I can trust, who trust me, and people that lift me up, right? So that's a big one for me. As far as leadership, to kind of get out of the way and figure out what the other person needs, I think is a role of leadership. I grew up with models of leadership that weren't that. It was like leaders were, I'm going to tell you what to do and you do that, and that's not my view of leadership. My view of leadership is, how can I serve this person? How can I help them grow? And what I found is when you're doing that for others, they're a lot more likely to help you, right? And that helps you in again, personal life and professional life. And then you really, be true to your values, know what you stand for, don't compromise them. There will always be pressure to bend to your values, but if you're strong in your values, you might not get everything you want, but things will work out.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: are there any philosophies that you live by from, like, any particular leadership authors or people that you really kind of embrace a lot of their teachings and then apply? I mean,
a lot of it, kind of my basic philosophy is a lot of kind of Stoic philosophy. It's focused on the things that are inside your realm of control.
Okay.
Things that are outside your realm of control, don't pay a lot of attention to. If you're doing those things, I think one of my favorite books is a book called Reboot. It's Reboot, The Art of Leadership and Growing Up in Leadership, something like that. But it's by Jerry Kalland.
Okay.
And one of the questions he asked in the book is, how am I complicit in creating the conditions I claim to not like, right? So really, what is my role?
Right.
And I think if I'm constantly evaluating my role in a situation, especially if it's something I don't like, it doesn't mean I'm at fault. Doesn't mean I'm responsible for everything that's going on, but how have I contributed to it? It allows me to best navigate my way out of it, right?
Nice.
So that's
being self-aware.
Right, being
Right,
self-aware, and then again taking ownership of my situation and my solution.
There's another one that I was gonna. You sparked a memory called "Leadership is Overrated" by a retired Navy SEAL. It talks about how to lead self-led teams.
Yep.
So that you don't have to be a top-down leader.
Right.
You talk about observing that. Certainly in the military community, you see a lot of that.
Oh yeah.
And he said, hey, in the SEALs, yeah, sure, we have a chain of command, but we are taught to have a self-led team, right? Because you may be by yourself. It's not a top-down. So what can you do as a leader to create that environment to have a self-led team where you don't have to say, go do this and go do that? And so knowing your role as a servant leader, I thought that was awesome.
I want to give you a second to give some gratitude here in a moment, but I do want to acknowledge you and what you've been able to achieve on LinkedIn. I can always look for authenticity on the type of people that are out there and creating things. And I know that you've expanded your reach, gotten over 10,000 followers. But one of the things that I think is really critical when I'm looking at people, like who do I want to follow and check out and reserve, is that type of person who's got value added content. And so I would tell those that are on the show, if you're wanting to find somebody who you can, like I was actually speaking to a mentor of mine this morning, about all the different truths that are out there that you can stumble into, and all of a sudden you're following the wrong person with the wrong truths or the wrong principles. But this is a guy who's actually lived it, breathed it, and is in it. And so there's a lot of integrity in that when I hear you teaching, because I've just judging by our previous conversation, I said, okay, this guy's actually worth listening to because he's probably done it, right? Because to this day and age, there's a lot of people that you can tune into that they maybe haven't even done it, or done very little of it, but they just figured out a way to package it and say it with confidence, and all of a sudden now they're out there teaching it. Right. But so I would do want to thank you for being the guy that's actually bringing leadership content to the marketplace, but is also, anytime you attach a CEO of 500 people to that, I forgot, I'm drawing a blank on his name, the gentleman that was your CEO from Apache.
Stephen Hillier.
Stephen, yeah. He's not out producing content, but that's a guy that you spend time with, and you immediately go, this guy is like the real deal. Like he came from the industry. He's been in the trenches, and now he's running thousands of people. You're running hundreds of people, but you're a trench guy who grew up doing it, which you can tell is evident, right? So
I appreciate
it. That's a big deal. And so with that, man, is there anybody you want to recognize? Anything that you want to recognize before we hop off the show?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, obviously our employees, all 500 of them. It wasn't, Kenny was out there to start, and he and I did a lot of work at the beginning, but it's our employees out there now who are responsible for our growth, really.
Right.
So every one of our employees, I'm grateful to them. Grateful to Kenny for trusting me in this position. He reached out after he started the company and wanted to bring me on board, and it's changed my life. He was a dear friend before we worked together, and I'm just grateful for Kenny. Obviously my wife, and my wife is my biggest fan, so always grateful for her and everything that she brings to our family, and grateful to y'all for having me on. It's been a joy.
Glad to have you, Chad. And with that, again, Vecta Environmental Services and Chad Kalland, the CEO, and again, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. So again, we want to thank you guys for tuning in today. We will continue to try to bring you great content and do our very best to put our best foot forward. And if you have guests, guys like Chad, or people that we should talk to and bring on the show that have a great story to tell related to what it is that we do, we'd love to hear from you. So you can connect on the two of us on LinkedIn. And as always, our mission is to make sure that we get stories like this told and talk about the great things that are happening in this region. So you can tune into us and stay connected. If this is your first time stumbling across this show, and maybe you've heard it for the first time, you can subscribe. You can go to HoustonPortRegion.com. They have a media tab there, and you can just plug in, and it'll come out on all of the favorite channels that you listen to, and you'll be plugged into that. And I would also encourage you to go into the events page down there and get plugged into all the great things that are happening here at the Economic Alliance. So stay tuned, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to go to the Economic Alliance Houston Port Region website and subscribe to our channels. And let's pay it forward by sharing the good news of what's happening in our region by passing this episode to somebody you know.